Hey guys, Dozer here bringing you a new video. Today, this is going to be a big change of pace, and going forward, things are going to be looking a lot different. And so first off, welcome to Pursuit of Knowledge, Episode 1. This is going to be my podcast going forward. I know that there's a million podcasts out there, and I think there's reason for that. I think that podcasts are a really great format to allow people to do things that they want to do, while also not taking away too much of their time on a given week. People have busy lives, and up to this point, I've had a lot of freedom to be able to make content a lot of the times, multiple times a week, sometimes daily. And that's changed a lot, and I'll get into why that is in a minute. But so this is going to be the Flesh and Blood podcast that the channel is going to be running. And the idea of it is just to talk about current events, the state of the game, different decks, characters, you name it, just everything Fab. And, as I'm able to do so. So hope you will come along with the journey, and I'm going to try and post weekly, and we'll see how that goes. But I definitely want to make my presence in the Fab community a recurring thing. I definitely don't want to be going anywhere, but I will have to be taking a large step back from the amount of content that I've been putting out so far, and trying to grow alongside the game as I incorporate it into my new lifestyle. So what is that new lifestyle? Well, the big thing that has been a big change for me is that I've actually started my PhD. I applied for it back in the early parts of this year, kind of around January, and I got accepted around February, and I've just been ever since, really enjoying my time before I get started, because it's a big undertaking to be doing that, and I've been really excited about it. I'm really, happy to be here. I had to move to a new state and, completely new environment, completely new community and everything. So with all this work that I've been having to do, I've just really struggled to be able to be super involved with Fab. I mean, I didn't get to go to a single Road to Nationals. I didn't get to go to really any big events, and I'm certainly not going to have a lot of freedom to be traveling across the country to go to Worlds or anything like that. Luckily for me, though, Nationals for the United States is going to be in North Carolina, my home state, which is not too far away from me. So I do really hope that I can go and find some time to go on that weekend, even if it's just participate in the calling or to participate just in side events and just be there and hang out and see people. So if you're going to Nationals, I do hope to see you there. I will announce later on if I'm actually going to be able to go. But that's why I am going to be a lot more busy than I have been in the past, and I just wanted to put this out there because I've really come to love the Flesh and Blood community. Being able to talk about my favorite card game with everybody here on the internet has been really a blessing for me, and I've been able to meet so many cool people, go and interact with you all at all these events, and get to talk with you online, whether that's in the public discords or whether that's in my channel Discord server, and really build that community. It's really been an amazing experience, so thank you. But going forward, I'm just not going to be able to dedicate so much time to Fab anymore. And it kind of, maybe that'll change over time. Like maybe I'll find a way to fit it into my schedule more. But for right now, my first priority is my education. And so I'm just announcing that I won't be able to deliver on a lot of the things that I've been able to deliver on before. And so if that changes how you want to interact with the channel or how you want to interact with things like the Patreon, then I totally understand. So moving to the next part on the agenda here, I do plan to talk about Fab once a week, and so we'll talk a bit about some of the current events that have been going on in Fab and kind of talk about the state of the game in a second. But yeah, I still have a huge passion for the game. I think the game's going in a great direction. Back home, it really broke my heart to leave my local game store because the game's been growing really fast over there. We've had lots of people joining for Uprising drafts and Constructed, and a lot of new people being brought onto the game. And it's been really amazing, but me having to leave right at that time when everything's going so great, obviously it's bittersweet because I'm going off to do something I really need to do and really want to do, but also I'm leaving behind a really great community. And so I'm hoping to build one here where I am because there's not really a big Fab community, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up to the other places. In the meantime, though, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening in Fab this week. So right off the bat, we got our Living Legend leaderboard update, which is in here somewhere. Basically, Prism has hit 900. Here it is, probably. Yeah, Living Legend, Prism. Well, anyway, Road to Nationals has been going pretty well for everybody. There's been a lot of deck diversity that I've been hearing about. There's just been a lot of availability and viability of Bravo and Oldham and Lexi and Dromai and Prism, Viserai, Briar, Vi, you name it. Most characters have had a chance in the spotlight this season. However, towards the tail end, Fi has been kind of taking over everything. Fi with the stubby hammerers and other such combos that I haven't super been following, has just been able to output insane amounts of damage and really start to kind of terrorize the metagame a little bit. And so LSS spoke up on the ban list thing here, and they wanted to make sure that they were removing Fi's ability to do that by banning stubby hammers in Classic Constructed. You'll keep in mind that they had already banned it preemptively in Blitz because it represented so much damage just on board. But essentially now with stubby hammers banned in CC, Fi's going to have to work a little bit harder in order to get his damage off. And I'm all about that. I think that aggro in this game can be very boring. I think games ending very quickly can be boring. I think Fab really shines when you have to make real choices on every single turn of do I block and do I not? And when you have decks that are so skewed towards payoff from aggression that the only way to make them lose out on some of that value is by forcing them to, by forcing discards or tax effects, and you really only get those if you're a Ranger, Guardian, or Ice character just in general. And there's a lot of overlap there, right? So I think that while I do like kind of the dichotomy of, okay, well, you've got, your aggro decks that are really good against your value decks, and the value decks are good against the disruptive decks and so on, it kind of makes for a triangle meta. And while that can be interesting, I think that the balance is a bit too skewed towards the matchup, right? So what I mean by that is that, if I'm playing Prism, right, and we know that I love Prism, right? But if I'm playing Prism and I know that against an aggro deck, if I'm, let's say against Chain, right? If I'm playing against Chain and I'm trying to play my value strategy, then I'm probably going to get rolled over because I don't have the velocity to be able to snowball the game fast enough before they can just output lethal damage, right? The main reason for that is that you have this situation where on the one hand, right, you've got aggro decks that get a lot of payoff for doing what they already want to do, especially because aggressive cards tend to be numerically stronger than defensive cards, right? And the main reason for that is that, let's say you have a 0-cost attack action that's a red, right? It's going to do 4 damage on average. And if it's doing 4 damage and most cards block for 3, on average, the defender is going to lose out on that exchange, especially if that card has an on-hit effect. And then you're really, losing a lot of your resources and having a bad trade by blocking that. That being said, the game needs to move moving forward, right? You need to reward aggressive strategies so that you don't get into fatigue matchups, especially if Drone of Brutality was still around. You'd have a lot of people being unable to close out games because now the parity between offense and defense is too close. And then you have a stale game where it's more efficient and a lot of times to just be defensive and never, offer that aggressive option, right? And I don't think that's really where the game wants to be going either. I think that the game really does shine when you have people moving towards the end game and having to know that they will take damage, but choosing when and where to take that damage really matters. And for a lot of the times, like with Fi, when he's doing all this crazy damage, it hasn't really been mattering, right? The damage that he's doing is so much and puts you into that lethal range so quickly that you don't get to choose when to block. You have to block to survive, and then the Fi has all the freedom in the world to set up their kill on you because the aggression is stronger than the defense. So when you get low on HP and you don't have the room to kind of absorb the difference, right? That's when the game really starts to end. And I think that that's kind of a beautiful part about Fab, right? Where you have, especially in Blitz, it can be interesting where you get down to lethal range so quickly that it really changes the viability of different decks, because if I'm playing Dorinthia or Kano or Reinhardt in Blitz, then they can hit lethal thresholds very quickly. So you have to be much more careful about what you let through as far as damage is concerned than, say, in CC, where if you know that your hand does more damage than theirs, then you can just take everything and throw it back, and then they have to handle that. I think that Fab needs more cards that have payoffs if they hit, but that are not too skewed towards like the math part of the game, right? For breakpoints. So I think that things like like Herald of Erudition is a great example, right? Herald of Erudition is a very powerful card that hits, but it's not guaranteed to hit at all, right? Most heroes with a 3 block and a 2 block of equipment can easily stop the Erudition from hitting. And it's a 2 card investment for the Prism to threaten 5 damage, and that's kind of it, right? Like if they draw 2 cards, that's great, but realistically, them drawing those 2 cards is not actually going to do a whole lot, right? Like maybe it's another Herald, and so maybe they got like 5 free damage out of a hand. That's kind of like a snatch with go again. It's not particularly that much damage for the resource investment, right? Although obviously Prism is very strong, and Erudition is a great card, but Erudition can be countered, right? Like you can pop it with a Phantasm Breaker, and if Prism's got a lot of setup, she can mitigate that weakness. But because Erudition has this Achilles heel, right, where it has counterplay, not only in just blocking it with armor, but you can also pop it, right? There's multiple types of counterplay defensively that decks can kind of do generically that I think makes a big difference as to why it feels better to play against Erudition than it does to play against something like Snatch or like, a lot of these Vi combos that if you don't have very specific cards like, Ice D-Reacts or, you're an Icelander who's freezing their turn with Blizzards or, whatever the case is, it doesn't matter what you do, right? They have so many ways to get around your blocks that it's very, very difficult to even stand up to it, right? Especially when you start multiplying their value with Art of War and things like that. So I do hope that LSS is designing more towards these give and take effects, right? Like more like you've got a 3 attack, go again, that if it hits, it does something, because that produces a much more engaging decision of like, okay, well, I can block this with 1 card and deny them extra cards. I can function with my hand off of 2 cards, so I've got 1 more card to stop something important, and then you start getting into these situations where you have a lot of actual choice in how much damage you're going to leak through based on how much damage you can throw back. And there should be room for these cards, right, that are pushed, right? These 4 attack breakpoint cards, these 5 attack breakpoint cards, whatever. But when you're looking down the barrel of maybe Briar's Channel Mount Heroic turns, which can get very out of hand very quickly, or you can look at the, Fi Art of War, Subby Hammer turns, or, all these different things. It really skews these matchups to where decks that can't block well can't really stand up to it, right? And not to ramble, but I do think that the matchup spreads between the triangle decks, right? Like the Prisms versus the Oldheims versus the aggro, right? I think that needs serious work. I think that Prism should not be able to destroy Oldhim as consistently as she does. Just full stop. And maybe Prism's just too strong of a design, right? Like maybe LSS has already learned from their design, not mistakes because Prism's really strong, right? But just knowing that maybe Prism was a bit too strong, just on inherent design. And so when they made Dromai is clearly a lot weaker than Prism. I mean, there's a lot of flaws in Dromai that Prism doesn't have. And I think that maybe LSS recognized where to put those weaknesses in to make those matchups a bit more winnable for, the slower, more disruptive classes like, Oldhim and Lexi and Rhinar and these things. But, I can't really speak on that too much. I don't know how much better Dromai's matchup is, but at least on paper, it's not as crushing, right? Like you have a chance because there's a lot more points of contact for counterplay with being able to block dragons and pop them and, being able to, forcing the Dromai to have a lot of things pop and then eventually use the Ghostly Touch to try and swing back. But, she'll need like Semblance or other effects to guarantee that going through. So maybe they've already started to work in that direction. I do really love the direction that Dromai's gone as far as the design of the game, but she's part of this new wave of more balanced heroes that are kind of more in that Lexi power range territory. By the way, I think Lexi is probably the healthiest design of a character in the game, and I want more characters to be at her power level and not above and not below. I think that would be super cool. But, I think Dromai is a good direction for things to go into. I don't think Oldhim is a good way for things to go into, actually. I think that Oldhim's actually really toxic design. If you've ever played as like Lexi or something versus Oldhim, it can be very, very difficult just by the virtue of the fact that when you have a really good weapon and you have really good equipment and you have really good disruption and you have really good defenses just baked into your hero, there's very little room for characters that have to go offensive, right? Like there's no real wiggle room. Like you can't really block as Lexi, right? Like it does not really work out for you well because you need cards to pay for your arrows. You need cards to shoot. Those are your arrows, right? And you need buffs so your arrows actually do something, right? So normally Lexi needs at least a 3-card hand to do anything. And then the difference between a 3, 4, 5, 6-card hand is a really big difference. So I do think that just generally, right, you've got a situation where as long as the aggro decks are so good into Prism, and Prism's able to handle things pretty well, right? I don't think that's necessarily the part of the triangle that's weakest as far as design is concerned. I think that Prism can handle aggro decks at a pretty fair rate if she techs properly, but if you've got Prism kind of auto-winning versus Oldhim, you've got Oldhim kind of crushing the aggro decks, are you happy with that, right? As far as a metagame, because you've got decks like Dorinthia or, Rhinar or Dash, or a lot of these heroes that are more mid-rangey, more kind of flexible, but don't really specialize in one thing. And by nature of Fab as a game, a lot of heroes have this baseline power level of blocking 3, pitching blues. It's not like Dorinthia and all them get a lot of benefit out of being generalists compared to heroes like Oldhim or Prism, who, even though they have more skewed cost curves and more skewed pitch curves in their deck, they can still benefit a ton because their cards are just so flexible, so strong. And what I mean by that is that, like, for Guardian, right, Bravo's got Crippling Crush and Terra Sunder, which are amazing cards. They are extremely disruptive, extremely powerful. Dominate's very hard to play around for most characters, unless they side in a lot of defense reactions. And even then, siding in defense reactions actively makes your own game plan worse, right? So while it's good that decks have powerful cards, being able to have these really, really like powerful effects that are kind of unique in the game compared to something like a High Octane, which sure is a strong play, but it's not even in the same stratosphere as far as impact on the game, without tons of setup and tons of things going really right for the Dash player, right? And so Dash being a generalist, Dorinthia being a generalist, we kind of see in the Road to Nationals results that kind of taking place, right? Like the most powerful decks have been things like the aggro decks of Fi, and you have a bunch of the other characters, kind of coming in there, but then you look at some of the heroes like Azalea, who's obviously very weak because she has a lot of flaws, or you've got Kano, who's very narrow in how well he can be relevant to the metagame. You've got, especially when you look at the top 8 data, you've got your Viserais, your Prisms, your Phis, your Oldhims. You see the same characters recur. And, well, I think it's fine for, the balance of the game to kind of hover around a select group of characters. I do think that the reason it does that is that there's not enough room for the other characters to prey on those as generalists. So I really do hope that we get some more cards printed for, Dorinthia decks, Bolton decks, even Katsu, Icelander, whoever, to give them not silver bullets per se, but more give them tools that are disproportionately good against the best decks in the format that are still generally useful. I think LSS started doing a really great job of that in Everfest when they printed cards for Wizard like Scour or Pyroglyphic Protection, because those cards were specifically great for Wizards versus Runeblade, right? Especially Blue Pyroglyphic was really good versus Viserai for Icelander, because if the Viserai was ever stacking up like a whole bunch of rune chants or something, the Icelander could play Pyroglyphic out of Arsenal for free and then just not take any arcane damage that turn, which would be really cool if that card was good enough on its own, right? But it's not. The reason no one runs Pyroglyphic is that it doesn't do enough when it comes into play to warrant you activating it. And a big reason for that is just that it just costs too much, right? Like I'm pretty sure that it's not a zero cost card. So if you arsenaled a blue card, right, and Viserai is coming at you for arcane damage, if that Pyroglyphic doesn't stop at least 3 to 4 damage, you would have been better off just arsenaling a D-React, right? And so I think one of the things that LSS needs to try and do And one of the ways that they can actually help improve this dichotomy in the game, or this imbalance in the game, is by printing more cards that defensively are narrow in their applications, but are huge payoffs when they work, right? And so an example of that would be something like, sort of like Pyroglyphic, where maybe it was a defense reaction, right? And maybe the defense reaction was for Wizard, maybe it only blocked 2, right? But maybe it said for the rest of this turn, anytime you take 1 Arcane, you take 1 less, right? And so you'd have to hit, 2 or 3 Arcane on a turn after the first wave goes through, or something like that. Maybe it's an instant, right? Maybe they could just give in Wizard an instant that does that. But by giving it only to a certain class and tailoring their strengths and weaknesses into certain classes, I think you could really give a lot of these other decks some viability, because let's say Prism, right, is the best deck in the format, for instance, where she's winning most of our TNs, as she has been, right? Like maybe that's the case, and maybe Dorinthia, who normally really struggles into Prism, has like a card or two that really just fits into her deck naturally, but also just gives her a good matchup into Prism. And maybe that Dorinthia has to sideboard those out against her other opponents, because maybe they're not as good against Prism, or they're not as good against the other heroes than it is against Prism, right? So like maybe it would be something similar to Warrior's Valor, where you play the card, your Dawnblade gets to go again, and you get some damage extra out of it. But maybe it says if it hits, you destroy an aura, right? Like that is very good, obviously. Like it turns Dawnblade into a thing that can actually threaten the Spectras that Dory normally has problems with, but maybe it pays for that by being a Majestic, and it's only like a red card, so you only have 3 copies of it. You can't count on it all the time, but you can save up for it and try and really push through that big turn to swing the tempo, or something like that, right? Like there needs to be cards that still are close enough to the core identity of the hero that also helps them do stuff. Having silver bullet cards like Scour or Pyroglyphic doesn't quite do enough, because Fab's not a game where you can draw your hand and hold it, right? You can't hold on to that card all game for the prime moment like you could in other card games. Because we're constantly reloading our hands, the cards in our deck all have to kind of be serving the same functions, and if you are forced to run these silver bullet cards that are only useful sometimes, even with the arsenal, it's not really consistent enough. So that's what I would just say on that front. I think that I'm really happy about the way the game's going. It's a lot of fun to play the game. I've been playing a lot of Icelander recently, because with Prism at 998 Living Legend points, Prism's effectively dead in the water, right? Like I'm not going to be able to go into any big events for the foreseeable future. So for me, it's really killed a lot of my my zest for competitive play. Not only knowing that, I'm not going to be able to participate just no matter what I want to do going forward, but also the fact that even if I did come back to the game in a year or two for competitive play, right, to travel and do all these things, my favorite hero won't be there, right? That sucks. And that's been honestly a big thing that I've been dreading for a long time now. A friend of mine, and I've been trying to get him into Fab for a long time, and he thinks the game's great. Obviously, as a player of other card games, he's got his own opinions on maybe the monetization or getting product and things like that. But and he's the poor soul. He really likes Azalea, and hats off to that, right? But the big thing has just been that Living Legend as a system has been something that we've had problems with for a long time. My friend and I. Living Legend sounds cool on paper, right? You've got heroes that are doing really well for a long time. They are these Hall of Fame all-star heroes. They do well over time. And then they retire, right? To go off into the sunset and let some other heroes have some time in the sun. The problem is that Living Legend inherently does 2 things. One, without proper replacements for a certain play style, it can literally just delete things from the game. And on the other hand, it also can not only skew the metagame competitively, but also you literally just wipe out a whole bunch of the player base if that's the only thing they like to do. especially when it happens too fast, right? So the big thing here is, are there substitutes for the playstyle? And, are those cards still usable? LSS has made a big point to say like, oh yeah, eventually we'll print some more Shadow Rune Blades, or eventually we'll print some more, Light Illusionists, down the line. But if all you like playing is Chain, and then Chain is banned, sure, you could play young Chain in CC and probably win a lot of games because Chain's kind of busted. But, if you want to play Prism after she rotates, and, what are you going to do? Play young Prism in CC? That's not a good substitute, right? Like, being able to play the same hero but with half the HP is not even in the same stratosphere as being able to just play the same character but maybe having some problem cards banned, right? Like, Dromai is great. Dromai is really cool. Dragon Illusionist, I'm all about the thematic. Does Dromai play at all like Prism? Not really. I've played probably more Prism than, most of the people out there in this community. I mean, I've only played Prism for the past year, and ever since she came out. And, I've played so much of her and loved every minute of it that when I first got my hands on the Dromai cards and started playing with them, I was excited. I was like, wow, another Illusionist. It's kind of similar. Let's see how it goes. And then you find that sometimes summoning dragons can be clunky. Getting Ash can be clunky. Having 3 blocks is great, but not having active effects that kind of slow your opponent down feels like you're not controlling anything. Dromai was touted as this combo control deck, and she just blocks a lot, which is cool. That's very similar to the Tank Prism game plan that I used to do a lot, but it's not, in my head, that doesn't mean control. Like, when you are just blocking all game, you're not really controlling what your opponent's doing. You're just kind of letting them do whatever they want to do and hoping that you can survive, right? Especially when they get on-hit effects off of your dragons, and you don't really get to slow them down in that way. And then that's kind of all Dromai has. Like, all of her rares were dragons. All of her commons were based around Ash. And while Dromai's cards on the whole are very good, just on a base level, she's got good block, she's got good pitch, she's got a lot of go again, and she's got synergy with other things, as I've shown on the channel with the last Dromai decks I was really experimenting with. She's not Prism, And for me, I got into this game as much as I did because of Prism. I loved playing Prism, deck building, experimenting, competing, everything. And to know that my favorite character is not going to be legal just because she's done well for a year, that sucks. It's not like Prism came around and dominated the metagame. It's not like Prism was winning literally every event and crushing everybody and being, out there without any counters or anything like Starvo did, right? She's just been good the whole time. And isn't that the kind of deck that you want in the game? Right? Like, I understand that, Guardians have a really hard time against Prism. And I understand that it sucks when Wizards square up against Prism and there's nothing they can really do. That's why I'm saying that the issue is not that Prism exists. The issue is that these classes don't have enough counterplay, in their card pools to be able to sideboard for Prism effectively while still doing what they want to do. Many times people have said like, oh, just run Lead the Charge. But if Lead the Charge isn't what you want to be doing anyway, then it doesn't matter, right? So if LSS had simply given these classes that struggled into Prism more cards that naturally fit into what they try to do, just as they did for Runeblade with Runic Reclamation, then I'm sure that there wouldn't be such a disparity between the people who want Prism just gone forever and the people that want Prism to stick around, but maybe in a nerf state. I would much rather have Prism around if they, banned a couple cards from her, right? Like, I don't need every card in Prism's kit. There's plenty of options there to make interesting, compelling decks. But, the fact that after only 1 year, Prism is essentially going to be removed from the game. Light Illusionist cards going to be removed from the game. Effectively, there's no way to play them in CC legally. And, where do I go from there, right? Like, it really does just kind of strike me because I don't want to wait 2-3 years for another Light Illusionist. I've got my Ice Lexi, I've got my or Lightning, whatever. I've got my Lexi cards, I've got my Icelander cards, I've got my Dromite cards, but they don't replace the hero that I fell in love with, right? Starvo hit the scene and immediately was a problem, and then within 6 months was banned. That's good. Did the Living Legend system have to do that? No. LSS could have simply banned Starvo, and that would have been the end of it. They did not have to use the Living Legend system to keep Starvo in the game for as long as they did, let him terrorize everything, and then let him ship off with 1.5 times the number of points that he needed to rotate, right? Chain was a strong deck, terrorized the metagame when it came out, had to be banned. Well, it got hit by bans twice. The first time with the Seeds of Agony ban, and the second time with Plunder Run and such things. Chain's been hit by multiple waves of bans, and he still was a top contender for the entire time. So him rotating, I think, was important because I think Chain's core design was flawed. I think that his ability with creating Soul Shackles for free and getting Go Again off of it was just too powerful for the game, and it was very clear to see why, as over time he was the one that ended up winning the very first Pro Tour just by raw card advantage and amazing armor and everything, even against Starvo, one of the most powerful heroes that has ever touched this game, if not the most, right? So those two heroes have Living Legended, and Viserai and Blitz has gone to Living Legend as well after having the Bloodsheath Skeleton, 2-turn kill combos that were basically unstoppable in Blitz. And now Prism's going to Living Legend soon. And Prism's strong. She's got good matchups, but she's got bad matchups. Like, really bad matchups. And, back during the Briar meta, Prism was not even really viable when everyone was on Briar. It really did take people dodging Briar to do well with Prism in big tournaments. And, that's... honestly, Briar got bans so that she wouldn't hit Living Legend, right? Like, if Prism, instead of in the last ban restricted update, when Starvo got rotated and they had Autumn's Touch and all that happen, why didn't they just ban a couple cards from Prism to slow her down? I guarantee you it would have. She still would have been really good against certain heroes. She still would have had weaknesses versus certain heroes. Like, they could have banned Ode to Wrath and maybe even Haze Bending, right? They could have banned some cards from Prism that could have slowed her down and put her into a situation like Briar or like, these other heroes that she can still win events, but she will be toned down enough where she won't Living Legend quite so quickly. So anyway, I've been kind of rambling on the point, but the core idea is when a hero rotates, doesn't have to be Prism, the people that love that hero are going to really feel it. Flesh and Blood's a game where you can really express yourself through the playstyle that you like to play, the way you build your deck, because multiple heroes can be built multiple different viable ways. And let's say you enjoyed playing Lightning Lexi, right? And let's say Ice Lexi is the strongest version, and let's say Ice Lexi is winning all the tournaments. And let's say she Living Legends, right? You never played that deck. You never liked playing that deck, but now you can't play Lightning Lexi anymore just because it shares the same name with another hero. It's not like they're just banning the problem cards. You're losing the entire class. And I think that's going to be really negative in the long run. I think that LSS needs to either increase the rate of replacement heroes for the same class talent combinations, or they need to slow down the Living Legend system, because 1 year is not enough time for an entire archetype of the game to just be here and gone. 1 year, I've played many card games, and the best feeling, especially because this is supposed to be an eternal format, right? How well that's going is up for debate. But if I'm playing a game and my cards all of a sudden are just not usable for a number of years, that sucks. Sure, I could play casually with my friends, but that never works out, right? Because when the company or the authority on the game passes down bans or all these things, there's a reason, right? And people understand that reasoning, and they don't want to play a format that's not indicative of the actual format. People don't want to play with Stubby Hammer as Fi anymore. Why would you? It's not going to be in your tournaments, so why would you practice against it? Especially when it's clearly been deemed too powerful by the people whose job it is to run the game. So by essentially banning entire class combinations in short periods of time just because the deck does well, I think that's really flawed. I think that you want to reward people that are like playing a deck because it's popular, because Prism's never been that like dominant. She's just really popular because she's really fun and she's really cool. And if you start cutting out the most popular characters in your game, and Chain was cool, don't get me wrong, Chain was really cool. Demon, edgy, sorcerer, blade guy, it's a cool resonant design. And how many people are going to want to play Old Man with Hammer? How many people are going to want to play, Fi after he loses the ban? And Fi's cool too. Don't get me wrong. Oldham's cool in his own way, but when you cut away these large swaths of the player base who really like the design of a certain character without providing alternatives, you're just going to lose interest in people. And I think that Fab needs to be gaining interest and building momentum rather than cutting away its most popular, best performing characters when they have shown that they are willing to ban cards and that banning cards can be effective at slowing them down. I totally understand if you're not going to ban cards that you have to rotate some things until you can design a better version for the balance of the game. But when you do ban cards and then you also Living Legend things away very quickly, you don't use the tool that you set out. And so now once Prism Living Legends, right, when she rotates here, easily by the time Nationals starts or the end of the year, depending on when the set releases and ban announcements come out, she all the Light Illusionist cards are banned, and effectively all the light cards that she would run are banned, and all of the Illusionist cards that she really runs are banned, right? You remove so much of the ecosystem of the game that I don't know if the other heroes are compelling enough, right? So that's all I have to say about Living Legend to that point. Again, not to belabor the point, but I think it's a flawed system. I think it's not going in the right direction. I want to be able to play the hero that I like to play, even if it's in a weaker state, because at least then I can still play the hero that I like, right? So beyond that, obviously I'm losing a lot of my luster for competitive because, why should I keep up with the competitive nature of the game when I know that my hero is not going to be there, right? Sure, Icelander's cool and all, but it's not the same. So, if I want to be sticking around the game and still actively deck building and theory crafting and doing all this stuff, what's in it for me, right? Like, just even on the basis of not even like prizing or anything like that, but what's in it for me as an interesting thought exercise, right? Like, why should I invest my time into a hero when doing so is most likely going to get it rotated, right? I mean, I never picked Prism because she was the best hero. I picked her because I liked her. And if my time and effort into that hero has now basically been deleted because for the next couple of years it's not going to be legal, then why should I keep putting my time into it, right? So let's talk a little bit about that, right? So here's the channel. It's been a month since my last video. I've been, like I said, I had to move. I had to, start classes and all this, and it's been a really busy time for me. But I'm still really proud of the channel and really proud of the community and really proud to be here, to have met James, and been to the Pro Tour and been to Nationals and done all these cool things. And to hit 1,000 subscribers. I mean, that's a big milestone, especially in this community where 1,000, shout out to Outcast Haven. You guys I've been following your podcast this past month, as I've been since the beginning, me getting into the game. But, you guys are still up around that 1,500 subscriber mark. And to know that I'm getting close to one of the other big creators in the scene, just really helps me understand where I am in relation to the rest of you. So as kind of one of the newer channels, even though I've been around for a year, which is crazy to think about, it's just a cool feeling to know that, I've had an impact, right? And that I've been able to share my opinions and have these discussions with everybody in the comments and everything. So what I wanted to say was, I do have a Patreon. It's got this thing at the bottom of the screen. The Patreon has been a tremendous help in helping offset the cost of the channel, for me personally. I've been in and out of work for the past while, and now that I've started my PhD, I make very small amounts of money from it, to pay for living expenses like food and housing and everything. But I'm on a very tight budget, and I don't need or want any extra help. I'm not asking for your money just out of charity or anything like that. But the Patreon has made a tremendous difference in my ability to afford new audio equipment, new editing equipment, tripods, cameras, lights, all these things that have helped increase the quality of the content over time. And those things cost money. And all the people on Patreon that have supported me, thank you. I mean, truly, I could not have done all this without your support. Financially, just getting the engagement and the views and the just the whole situation is possible because of the viewers, and especially because of the patrons who have dedicated not only their time but also their hard-earned money. However much it is to them or however much it means to me, it all is part of the same picture, and I really have to thank you all for that. It's allowed me to keep doing what I'm doing and to be able to afford to stay in the game. Be able to get the Uprising cards that I need to be able to try and make content. Even though I haven't been able to make any videos since the Uprising cards released, not even a month ago now. We've almost hit a month of Uprising being out. I'm eager. I've been testing Icelander the whole time, talking with patrons, trying to do deck techs, and trying to talk about strategy for various events. But what I wanted to say is that the Patreon so far has been kind of threefold, right? The first tier, I guess you'd call it, the $5 tier, was essentially you get access to the patron chat on the Discord, and you get access to the patron exclusive videos that I post. I haven't posted those in a long time because they took a lot of effort to make, and I've just been really struggling to get quality, gameplay and things to review and use as, VOD review material, which is one of the main things that I would do, or deck techs when something would come out, things like that. So that was what the first tier kind of was. The second tier, and I would obviously post deck lists and explanations and stuff in the patron chat. We have a bit of a community there. The tier above that was the $15 tier. That was the coaching tier. What it came with was an hour of my time a week to talk about Fab, strategy, decks, gameplay, whatever, for $15 a month. In retrospect, that was a very low price for my time, and I was happy to do it. I really enjoyed all those times talking with people, and for me it was enjoyable. So even though if you divide that by 4, 4 hours, $15, it's like $4 an hour. That's very low. I was really happy to do it, and it made me really happy to do it. But going forward, I just can't promise that at that price point, right? My time has become a lot more scarce, and so it has to be a lot more valuable, right? So I won't be able to offer coaching for such a low rate anymore, especially not for an hour every week of my time, right? And I will try to figure out kind of what my schedule looks like here in the next month or so and get into a rhythm and then open that back up. But because I do have a lot to say about the game still, I still have a lot of opinions on Prism while she is legal, as well as Dromai and Icelander and all in the metagame as a whole. I've talked about Lexi a lot with patrons before as well. I think that... So that's the coaching tier, right? That's what I had been doing. And then I had the artwork tier, right? So I do a lot of pixel art. I've always done it, and I really enjoy doing it. So being able to offer that to people so that they could get, custom artwork done for them, whether that's playmats, card sleeves, you name it, card alters. I really enjoy doing that. But again, that takes a lot of time, and I don't really have that time to kind of just give for the amount that I was. So what I'm trying to say is that the Patreon, as it's been running, will still be there. I'm still going to try and find a way to make it work, but at the same time, I'm not going to be able to promise and deliver on the things that I've been promising before. And so if you are currently a patron and you wanted more content or wanted more out of it, I appreciate you for your support thus far, but if you drop from the program and everything, I totally understand. It's changing what it's offering. I'm changing what I can offer to you as a patron. So it's totally within your right, and I say Godspeed to everybody who says they don't want to keep supporting the channel because of that. But I do hope that some of you out there will still want to support the channel in whatever way you can or want to through the Patreon. Again, it's made a tremendous impact on my ability to keep making content. And while I will be making, these podcasts now, as well as trying to still find time to make gameplay or have, relevant discussion on the game, if that's something that you don't feel is worth your money anymore, I totally understand. Though I do hope some of you stick around because it does help a lot. And I am very grateful and appreciative of it. So beyond that, it kind of talks about everything on the agenda that I wanted to cover, but the last thing that I want to talk about is going to be some of the things that have been in the news with Fab, kind of just in the general player environment. I don't have a horse in the race with other content creators, right? Like I don't, I don't want to pick a side with anything. I don't know anything about stores, about print runs, about who said what. And this is in reference to the compete sport situation, right? I don't know anything about it. I'm a outside observer, the same as you. I get my information from everybody that talks about things in the community. I don't have any inside connection to anybody in the situation, so I'm not going to speak on it. But what I can say is that as a community, Flesh and Blood has been one of the most positive communities that I've encountered. Everyone that I've met has been very friendly. Everyone just wants to play a good game and to have a good time doing it. And I want us to remember that, especially in relation to kind of how that one box opening went with Uprising by the, I think it was Open Boosters. There was a lot of negativity thrown his way, and it was horrible to watch. That wasn't necessary, right? I think that as a community, we need to make sure to stay positive and to be welcoming and just enjoy the game for what it is. It's a game. We're here to have fun. We're here to enjoy the experience of playing the game first and foremost, not to win all the gold foils, not to get glory or prestige. It's a card game, right? Like, it's really cool and fun to compete at something and to get known for doing something a certain way. But at the end of the day, it is a card game. It is a hobby. It is something to do for fun. We should not be up in arms about things that, in the grand scheme of things, are not the most important things in our lives, right? Things like our families, our work, our goals long term. And maybe Fab is something that is all those things for you, and that's awesome. And I want everyone to care about it. I care about it a ton. That's why I'm here still making videos, even when my own time is extremely, cut short. But, we shouldn't try to cause drama. We shouldn't try to be up in arms about something. I've seen a lot of comments of people saying they're going to quit Fab because of this and this whole compete sport thing, or how, people throwing stuff left and right. I don't think that's right. I think that if you enjoy Flesh and Blood, play Flesh and Blood. If you don't enjoy Flesh and Blood, don't play it, right? Or wait and see if a thing that makes you enjoy it comes around, right? Like a new class, a new hero, a new game mode. We could still see the the player versus environment content come out, and you could have this really cool tabletop RPG type of feel to it, and that'd be awesome, right? So maybe it's just not the time, because it is so skewed towards competitive right now, for a lot of people to enjoy the game as much as they want, especially when there are all these other games coming out that I don't even really follow, but I've seen a bunch of other content creators kind of drift away from Fab, and they like those games, and that's awesome. So basically, again, I don't have an opinion on the compete sport thing. I don't know anything to be able to even make a comment. All I know is I've met both George and James. When I met George, I met him at Nationals in Florida, I believe. And I introduced myself to him. He was very nice. He's very friendly. When I told him I was applying to PhD programs, he offered to have me get in touch with people that he knew in case I wanted to do that. And I thanked him profusely for it. And he wasn't asking for anything. He just said, hey, if I can help you, like I'm from a very similar area to him. I'm from North Carolina, so it's not too far away. He knew about the schools I was applying to, and so he made that offer to me. Just very casual, off the cuff, no follow-up to that. I never followed him up about that, but just he was very friendly, right? Like, he was a good guy. And I've talked with James, right? And James is an awesome guy, right? They both have been kind to me, friendly, courteous. So I don't think, from my own dealings with them, that either of them are bad people. But for anybody who's on either side of the aisle, right? Like, I don't think that George's characterization of James aligns with my experiences of James, and I don't think the outlash against compete sport, or the characterization of it by other creators, is necessarily entirely accurate. But again, what do I know, right? I've only met each of them once, and haven't really spoken with them much. So all I'm going to say is that my experiences with both parties have been positive, and so as far as I'm concerned, I tend to want to treat everybody positively that treats me positively. However people treat each other is not my business. Obviously, if it comes to light and it becomes an issue, then obviously you have to adjust how you behave. But my plan, and what I would encourage the rest of the community to do the same with, is to understand that people make mistakes. People have their own factors that they have to consider with how they take action. And while someone can make a mistake that as a business you don't want to continue with that person, that doesn't mean that the person's a bad person. It doesn't mean that they are, someone that you shouldn't still engage with, right? If you want to engage with a certain person, still do it. But just be aware and keep your eyes open to the fact that you need to listen to more sources and be a bit more on guard as things go forward. I have all the faith in the world that LSS is a great company. Every interaction I've had with LSS has been amazing. They have been extremely gracious with being in touch with somebody who, even at the time, was a very minor voice in the whole thing. Back when my first ever RTN happened, my only ever RTN at this point, really, the gem system prevented me from getting my rightful top 8 spot to compete for the first place. And my top 8 spot went to a friend of mine instead, who I had beaten in the round 5 of the tournament, and he ended up winning the whole thing. So it's a funny thing that we remember now, but when I emailed LSS about how disappointed I had been with the way that I had spent all these months learning the game and getting into the game and trying to compete, and then the software is why I don't see the results that I earned, they helped me address that issue, right? They made active steps, unannounced, unasked for, or not even unasked for specifically, but they helped me in ways I could never even imagined as a compensation for their mistake on their end. Ever since, over time, I've been able to be given a promo, well, not a promo, but, like a spoiler card for Uprising to help promote the set. I've been able to, meet LSS people and talk with them when I've been at the Pro Tour, for instance, and just have these dialogues, and it's been amazing. So I want everyone to just stay positive. I want everybody to know that Flesh and Blood's run by great people. It is. It's a hard thing to run a business. It's really hard. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. And it's a hard line to walk because most people run a business because they do so out of passion, right? They love the thing that they do, or they're really good at the thing they do, and they want to make it into something they do all the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it, right? And so the people at LSS love card games. They love Fab. They love what they do, and they do it because they're passionate about it. So just remember that. They are here because they want to be. They are here because they love it. And they will make mistakes. They're human, but their hearts are in the right place. They're doing everything that they can. And as long as they're doing that, I think that and as long as the people who play the game can carry that torch of positivity and just love for great games, I think we'll all be okay. So in closing, Flesh and Blood's in an interesting position right now. The amount of new players that have been in the area I was in back home was only growing. Out here, I'm trying to grow my community where I'm at now. And the set has been really cool. Obviously Fi is really strong, but, Uprising has a lot of really cool heroes in it. And I'm really excited to see what they do with Dynasty. I'm really excited to see what they do with sets in the future. And I'm really excited to be analyzing cards and everything going forward with all of you later. So one last thing. If you check my Twitter, you will find that, which is DozerFab, at DozerFab on Twitter. You will find a whole bunch of things that I had been releasing back during the start of Uprising, such as my Icelander damage calculator, my deck list for Icelander and Dromai, as well as my analysis document and I'll link all these in the description, I suppose, as well. But if you wanted some Uprising content from me that you haven't been able to see because you don't follow me on Twitter, I will link it in the description down below. And so just be sure to follow me on Twitter because I will be much more likely to be posting there in the future. So if you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed kind of the discussion. And I know that when I watch other content creators, it's fun to just kind of, listen to it while driving or doing things. So hopefully you've been able to get some fun out of this. So otherwise, really do appreciate you sticking around to the end and watching the whole video. It's a great community and I'm happy to be here. And I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Take care and have a good one. Peace.